And he said, "Go forth and stand upon the mount before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by. And I want you to notice this really interesting story in this passage. A great and strong wind rent the mountains and brake in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, don't miss this, a still small voice. And it was so when Elijah heard it that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entering in of the cave. And behold, there came a voice unto him and said, "What doest thou here, Elijah?" The third point I want to make tonight is this: when the world attacks, we must keep from being distracted. Elijah is basically renewing his spirit and getting back to doing the things that God has called him to do. And there comes, the Bible says, a great and strong wind that rent the mountain. But the Bible tells us that the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And here's what I believe God is trying to teach us. Sometimes when the world is attacking us and when the world is pressing and when they're out there chanting and they're out there harassing us as we're trying to come in to church, it feels like, there's just this earthquake and this fire and this wind and there's all these things that can take our attention. And Elijah could have said, well, surely I've got to place my attention on this whirlwind, or surely I've got to place my attention on the fire, or surely I've got to place my attention on these things that are meant to distract. But the Bible says that God was in the still small voice. And you know what, as Christians, when the world attacks, be careful not to get too distracted. There are people in our church, I already know, that are not coming back. Not because they don't like our church. Not because they don't like what we preach or what we believe. Not because they don't agree with Sunday night sermon. Here's why they're not coming back: because of the earthquake and because of the wind and because of the fire out there. And they're allowing their eyes to be distracted when they need to be listening for the still small voice of God that is telling them to continue on. When they need to be listening to the still small voice of God that is telling them, "Elijah, you're doing fine. Elijah, you're doing right. Elijah, it doesn't matter if they hate you. Elijah, it doesn't matter if they threaten you. Elijah, I still have a plan for you." When they should be listening to that voice, they're being distracted by all the mess out there. I want to encourage you, when the world attacks, be careful about being distracted. Be careful about deciding whether you're going to come to church or not based on how many people are going to harass you on the way in. Look, if you can't come into church when there's protesters out there, how do you think you're going to make it during the tribulation? If you can't come to church because somebody's going to yell at you, how are you going to serve God when they're trying to kill you? How are you going to serve God when good night. I think there's some Christians who are going to take their own lives, I guess, because if you can't stand up to that, you're not going to stand up to the mark of the beast. You can't stand up to that, you're not going to stand up to the Antichrist. We need a Christianity that is disciplined enough to say, I'm not going to be distracted, I'm not going to be intimidated, I'm not going to focus my attention on anything but the voice of God. And sometimes when they're loud, we have to listen for the still small voice of God.